Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 3 episode number 11 based on novel. So let's start. When Ju Yuan's figure charged into the misty Genesis reservoir, the token in his hand suddenly shook, before combusting and swiftly turning to ashes. The sight of this caused Ju Yuan to think for a moment. A split second earlier, he had felt something sweep through him, before the token began to combust. If his guess was not wrong, it should be due to the Genesis rune boundary that surrounded the Genesis reservoir. Without a token in one's possession, one would likely be flung away. At this current moment, Ju Yuan and Yao Yao were standing in the air above the reservoir, while an endless stream of glowing figures flew past above them, heading towards every possible direction. Ju Tai, Zhong Yang and the rest had also split up after entering, evidently planning on searching for Dragon Genesis Essence on their own. Searching for Dragon Genesis Essence was a relatively personal matter, and the majority preferred to conduct this activity alone. This was to prevent any allocation problems or other disputes from occurring, which would only cause more inconvenience. However, there was no need for Ju Yuan and Yao Yao to take such measures. Their relationship was quite special, and there would naturally be no squabbles between them due to the Dragon Genesis Essence. Moreover, Yao Yao did not even need such a thing. She had come to the Genesis reservoir not for the Genesis marrow baptism, but purely because she was bored. We should also find a spot for ourselves, and find out how to search for the Dragon Genesis Essence. Ju Yuan smiled at Yao Yao. Yao Yao had no objections, carrying the lazy Tunton in her arm as she nodded. Tunton stretched out its tiny head, and stared at the mist that was endlessly billowing from the waters below. No one could tell what it was thinking. Hence, Genesis Chi rose from under Ju Yuan's feet, bringing to two of them in a random direction. The Genesis reservoir was extremely vast, numerous giant heaven pillar-like mountains towering within it. These giant peaks were akin to the tall walls of a stronghold, leaving one no choice but to make long detours, making the reservoir an enormous maze. Ju Yuan and Yao Yao flew for an incensed stick of time, before gradually slowing down. They found a valley next to the reservoir waters and landed in it. On a rock next to the water, Yao Yao stretched out her hand to test its temperature, before gently removing her socks, revealing her fair and slender calves. Her foot peeked into the water and began to sway lightly as a satisfied look appeared on her beautiful face. Soaking her feet in the reservoir was clearly very comfortable for her. Ju Yuan could not help but cast his gaze over, purely because of those mesmerizing pair of legs. Yao Yao's bright eyes looked towards Ju Yuan, the red lips of her tiny mouth raising slightly as she said, "This place is not bad. Ju Yuan, you'll have to work harder and become one of the 10 chosens so that you'll receive a personal portion of the Genesis reservoir. Then I'll be able to come here whenever I want for a soak." Ju Yuan did not know whether to laugh or to cry. So the biggest benefit of becoming one of the 10 great chosens for you is to come here for a soak. You can have a good soak here. I'll go inside the reservoir to have a look. Ju Yuan was clearly somewhat eager, as he cast his gaze towards the misty sea-like waters. Yao Yao nonchalantly nodded. Ju Yuan did not delay, leaping directly into the waters. Once he entered, he felt his body grow heavier, as if he had jumped into a swamp. The waters of the reservoir originate from that origin dragon vein, and hence contain a natural pressure that makes it extremely heavy. It's going to be very taxing on my Genesis Chi to swim inside it. Ju Yuan was already prepared. With a thought, the Omnipython Chi in his Chi dwelling whizzed out and wrapped around his body. The moment the Omnipython Chi appeared, Ju Yuan suddenly cried out in surprise. In that split second earlier, he had felt the pressure from the water weaken substantially. The feeling of heaviness also vanished, making Ju Yuan feel as if he was a fish in water. What's going on? This unforeseen situation stunned Ju Yuan. He had not heard senior brother Ju Tai mention anything about this. To think that Genesis Chi would have the power to block the pressure from the origin dragon vein. Ju Yuan frowned as he fell into deep thought. It was a long time later, before he looked towards the Omnipython Chi swirling around him as his heart trembled a little. Could it be because of the ancestral dragon scripture? The Omnipython Chi he cultivated originated from the ancestral dragon scripture, while the Genesis reservoir originated from the origin dragon vein. Could they be related somehow? After all, they both had dragon in their names. This was the only conjuncture Ju Yuan had come up with. If not, he could not explain why the pressure from the Genesis reservoir had no effect on him. In the end, Zhu Yuan to get himself tied up over such details, especially since it was a good thing for him anyways. Without the pressure, his Genesis Chi consumption in the reservoir would be far less than the others, giving him a huge advantage. With such thoughts in mind, Zhu Yuan decided not to tarry any longer. His figure moved, swiftly swimming towards the depths of the reservoir. As he swam deeper, he discovered the presence of a faint mist inside the reservoir. Fortunately, he could still had his bearings due to his spirit senses. After swimming for a long time, Zhu Yuan's body suddenly paused, because he had felt a faint undulation. It came from under some giant boulders below him. His figure gradually descended, landing on one of the boulders, and stomped on it with one of his feet. The boulder immediately shattered as a thumb-sized ball of light slowly began to rise. Zhu Yuan grabbed it and curiously uncurled his fingers. A thumb-sized golden crystal floated on his palm, a drop of golden liquid inside it. The liquid appeared to be extremely viscous, slowly squirming about as if it was alive, while giving off peculiar undulations. Is this the Dragon Genesis essence? Zhu Yuan observed the drop of viscous fluid. If he was not wrong, it should be the most important item for the Genesis Marrow baptism, the Dragon Genesis essence. But this is a little too diluted. Zhu Yuan awkwardly scratched his head. According to Zhu Tai, even the lowest one dragon baptism would require at least several dozen drops of Dragon Genesis essence. Zhu Yuan retrieved a bottle and placed the Dragon Genesis essence inside. However, while Zhu Yuan was engaged in this task, the water behind him rippled faintly. A faint silhouette stealthily crept out from the rocks, as a somewhat translucent 100-feet-look beast appeared behind him. The beast's eyes greedily stared at Zhu Yuan's figure, as if it was looking at something delicious. Next, it opened its giant mouth and lunged towards Zhu Yuan. The moment the creature moved, a brush shadow wrapped in golden Genesis Chi tore through the water, bringing with it astonishing power, as it instantaneously pierced the beast's head. Zhu Yuan turned around and gazed at the somewhat translucent giant beast. Is this the aquatic beast born from the dragon Chi of that dragon vein? Zhu Yuan observed the heavily injured creature that was still desperately struggling. It was about 100 feet long, and Zhu Yuan estimated its strength to be at the first layer alpha origin. However, Zhu Yuan was slightly taken aback when he saw its eyes, because he realized that it was staring at him with extreme desire, still continuously opening its mouth to bite at him, as if itching to swallow him. Aren't these aquatic beasts not supposed to have any intelligence, and move according to instinct? Zhu Yuan was quite puzzled, but the greed and desire in the aquatic creature's eyes was just too clear. Was its instincts really telling it to eat him? He had never heard senior brother Zhu Tai mention anything like this. Zhu Yuan frowned, but could not be bothered to put too much thought into it. His hand grasped around the heavenly Yuan brush, as Genesis Chi spouted out from his body. Boom! The 100-foot-long body instantly exploded, a shockwave sweeping outwards as golden light began to rise. Zhu Yuan caught the golden light, and it transformed into a golden crystal in his hand. It was the same Genesis Dragon Essence crystal as earlier, but appeared thicker and more sturdier than the previous one, while the drop of Dragon Genesis Essence within was also a little more concentrated. After keeping it, Zhu Yuan did not linger any further, turning his body to continue his search. It was not long before he stopped once again, because he had seen the water to his front rippling as giant aquatic beast after beast slowly appeared, surrounding him. Zhu Yuan's frown grew even deeper. It was not because of the number of aquatic beasts, but because he had discovered that all of their translucent beast eyes were filled with intense desire and greedy as they stared at him. Exactly the same as the one from before. Something's not right, mumbled Zhu Yuan. Golden Genesis Chi appeared at the bottom of the reservoir like an angry python, tearing through the water as menacing 100-feet aquatic beast after beast was instantly ripped to pieces. Zhu Yuan wielded the heavenly Yuan brush. With a jerk of its tip, the snow-white hairs scattered, transforming into white strings that tangled around several aquatic beasts' bodies, before suddenly tightening, causing them to burst apart. The water churned violently due to the aftershocks from the battle like a giant whirlpool, while Zhu Yuan stood at its center, killing aquatic beast after beast. After a few dozen minutes, the waters gradually returned to calmness. Zhu Yuan stood there, and waved his sleeve as dozens of golden Dragon Genesis Essence crystals flew towards him and were caught by his hand. All of the aquatic beasts that had surrounded him earlier were about 100 feet in length. Although there had been many of them, each one was at most equivalent to a first-layer alpha origin, and thus naturally did not pose much of a threat towards Zhu Yuan. Hence, after a brief display of his abilities, All of them were slaughtered, gifting Zhu Yuan Dragon Genesis Essence crystal after crystal. Zhu Yuan kept the crystals, but his brows were still tightly furrowed. The crazed and desperate way the aquatic beasts had attacked him earlier was definitely not normal. From what Zhu Tai had told him, the two biggest problems he had to deal with in the Genesis reservoir were the high consumption of Genesis Qi due to the pressure in the water, and the extreme difficulty in finding these aquatic beasts due to their skill in hiding. However, from what he could see, none of the aquatic beasts had any intention of concealing themselves, delivering themselves straight to his front door instead. This was inconsistent with what Zhu Tai had told him. But it seems to be a good thing. If these aquatic beasts did not voluntarily send themselves to me, it would have taken me at least an entire day to hunt so many of them. Mumbled Zhu Yuan to himself. At the very least, his harvest was pretty good so far. Thus, he only pondered over this matter for a little, before once again rapidly propelling himself through the water with his Genesis Qi. This time, however, his hand was tightly clenched around the heavenly Yuan brush, and his expression more vigilant than before. After traveling for quite some time without detecting any activity at all, Zhu Yuan began to relax a little. It may have been a coincidence earlier that he just so happened to chance across a group of aquatic beasts, right? However, before Zhu Yuan could fully convince himself, his expression suddenly trembled. The Genesis Qi in his body began to circulate, covering it as his eyes gazed towards the front. The waters there were rippling as dozens of giant aquatic beasts began to surface. The two beasts leading this group had reached a length of over 300 feet, while the rest were approximate 200 feet long. These were comparable to the third layer Alpha origin. At this current moment, these aquatic beasts' eyes were likewise filled with greed as they locked onto Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan sighed softly, no longer any doubt in his heart. This was no coincidence. There seemed to be something on him that was drawing these aquatic beasts. What exactly is it? Zhu Yuan pondered. The aquatic beasts before him clearly were not going to give him any time to think. They released a peculiar cry as their enormous bodies seemed to cut through the water, charging straight at Zhu Yuan. Million Whale Rune. A giant black brush that glowed a dazzling gold was powerfully swung downwards as the faint silhouette of an ancient whale appeared. With dreadful power, it smashed into the head of the 300 feet aquatic beast at the front of the pack. Boom. The brush landed as a wave of Genesis Qi exploded, making the waters within 1,000 feet churn violently. As for the aquatic beast that was comparable to a third-layer Alpha origin expert, it was instantly blown apart. Zhu Yuan's body gradually etherealized, transforming into a blurry shadow as he shot forward. Aquatic beast after beast exploded without any resistance. The battle was swiftly over. With Zhu Yuan's current strength, he was able to directly face even a fifth-layer Alpha origin opponent. These merely third-layer equivalent aquatic beasts were naturally unable to stop him. After the battle was over, Zhu Yuan collected the Dragon Genesis Essence crystals. The water rippled with a swing of his heavenly Yuan brush, as he let out an icy chuckle and said, "I won't turn away any of the Dragon Genesis Essence sent straight to my doorstep. I'm itching to see just how many you guys will be gifting me." The moment his voice faded, Zhu Yuan's figure swiftly shot forth again, brimming with motivation. He was done with mulling over the issue. It did not matter why these aquatic beasts were coming for him, especially since his goal was Dragon Genesis Essence. The more that came, the better it would be for him. As such, Zhu Yuan encountered another 5 waves of aquatic beasts in the next hour. The battles that erupted were extremely intense, Zhu Yuan going at it with his full power, causing the waters around to churn violently as all the aquatic beasts that appeared were slayed. It could be said to be a full and bountiful harvest, a look of excitement revealing itself on his face as he hunted. 9 dragons cannon, 5th dragon. 5 Genesis Qi beasts roared as they pounced, ripping a nearly 400 feet aquatic beast to pieces. A fist-sized Dragon Genesis Essence crystal rose from its remains, and was grabbed by Zhu Yuan. Who else? Zhu Yuan let out a hearty laugh. He had gradually grown more and more thrilled as he continued to hunt, because the aquatic beasts were donating a tremendous amount of Dragon Genesis Essence crystals. According to his estimation, the number of crystals he had currently collected would already be able to achieve a 4 dragons rank baptism. And it had been accomplished in only 2 hours. With such a haul, Zhu Yuan was now quite excited indeed. Worked into a killing frenzy, Zhu Yuan gripped the heavenly Yuan brush, its tip pulsing sharply as he boldly declared, "No matter how many of you come, I'll kill you all." However, the instant his voice sounded, the waters to his front began to violently ripple, as 500 feet aquatic beast after beast rapidly approached at an alarming speed. There were a total of 8 of these 500 feet aquatic beasts, along with dozens of 400 feet beasts, and even more shorter ones. A lineup like this immediately made the bold look on Zhu Yuan's face turn rigid. If there was only one 500 aquatic beast, Zhu Yuan would naturally be confident of slaying it, but 8 at the same time together with so many others, even a 6th-layer Alpha Origin disciple would have to retreat. Green and white interlaced on Zhu Yuan's face. He gazed at the incoming swarm, and ultimately gritted his teeth and said, "You win." Next, he kept the heavenly Yuan brush and fled. He was no fool. Given the scale of this group, all of his Genesis Chi would likely be exhausted even if he somehow managed to win after a bitter struggle, and using up all of one's Genesis Chi in the reservoir was clearly not a smart decision. Bubbles were emitted from the giant mouths of numerous aquatic beasts as they violently jerked their bodies, rapidly cutting through the water, their figures turning into blurred shadows as they zipped towards Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan's body etherealized, his speed as quick as lightning, while cursing inside as he shot a glance back at the doggedly chasing pack. He had not expected to draw out so many of them. The only thing he could do now was to shake them off, before making any other plans. A human and a horde of aquatic beasts continued their chase in the reservoir, occasionally encountering other disciples, who were immediately stupefied by this scene. They were having such a hard time searching for aquatic beasts in the Genesis reservoir, so how the heck did so many aquatic beasts gather to chase a single person? There were actually some disciples that thought of attacking, but after getting a clearer view of how many there were, their scalps instantly turned numb as they quickly backed away. A horde of such scale was something that normal purple sash disciples had no confidence in handling. Zhu Yuan continued to flee, but he realized that more and more aquatic beasts were joining the line at his tail. This made him no longer dare to stay in the Genesis reservoir, and he hurriedly began to return on the route he had came from. In a certain valley, Yaoiro's slender legs were gently swaying in the water, while Tunton lazily lay beside her. Tunton stood up all of a sudden, and unleashed a few barks at the reservoir. The waters broke open, and a miserable-looking figure shot out, clearly panicked as he landed on a boulder. Rumble. The water behind him continued to break open, as enormous aquatic beast after beast leapt out of the reservoir, menacingly pouncing at Zhu Yuan with their mouths wide open. Roar. At the shore, Tunton's originally tiny body abruptly began to grow at this moment. Dark gold light flowed as golden scale armor appeared, glowing as if magma seemed to be flowing under it. In a short few breaths, the cute little creature had turned into a sinister-looking mysterious giant beast, as a terrifying pressure swept out from its body. Tunton's 4 legs sprung off the ground, and appeared in front of Zhu Yuan. Its giant mouth opened as a frightening suction force exploded from the black light flowing within it, sucking in the entire 500 feet long aquatic beast that was leading the pack. Roar. After swallowing one of the aquatic beasts, Tunton roared once again, the thunderous roar violently shaking the entire valley as a powerful presence unfurled. The aquatic beasts that were just about to fly out from water immediately froze, as if being restricted by something. In the end, they unwillingly sunk back into the reservoir, disappearing from sight. The chaotic surface of the reservoir gradually returned to calmness. Tunton's giant body also began to shrink, swiftly returning to its cute dog-like form. It then turned its head and swept a gaze at Zhu Yuan. Yao Yao cocked her head slightly. The previous scene had not alarmed her at all. Instead, she stared at Zhu Yuan in interest as a playful angle rose from the corners of a ruddy little mouth. Was it fun? Zhu Yuan wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Soon after, he suddenly realized that something was amiss, his eyes widening as he looked towards Yao Yao. You know what's going on. From Yaoiro's appearance, it seemed as if she knew that he would be chased by the aquatic beasts after entering the Genesis reservoir. In the valley by the shore, Yao Yao raised her arms and stretched as she let out a yawn in response to Zhu Yuan's wide-eyed stare, revealing the perfect curves of her lovely body. However, Zhu Yuan was not in the mood to admire them at this moment, merely continuing to stare at Yao Yao in bewilderment. The aquatic beasts here are born from the dragon Chi emitted from the origin dragon vein. Although they possess no intelligence, they are still able to act according to instinct. Yao Yao gently swung her fair feet, beads of crystal-like water droplets sliding down her legs, dazzling brilliantly under the sunlight. The Omnipython Chi on your body has its roots in the ancestral dragon scripture, and in a certain sense also contains dragon Chi. Moreover, it's dragon chi that is closest to the original. That's why the natural pressure everyone else has to withstand in the Genesis reservoir does not have much of an effect on you. And it is also due to the omnipython chi that these aquatic beasts have been chasing you. In their eyes, you are the most delicious of delicacies, and if they manage to eat you, they may even become sentient, allowing them to transform into a true living creature, instead of their current existence where they can only act on instinct. There was a sliver of amusement in Yaoyao's eyes as she gazed at Zhu Yuan and continued, while you want to obtain the Dragon Genesis essence in their bodies, they too are also thinking about eating all the time. Zhu Yuan was stunned for a moment. Although he had an inkling that this was the case, only after hearing Yaoyao's explanation did he truly understand the reason. So the ancestral dragon scripture was the culprit. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Said Zhu Yuan in a slightly peeved manner. Yaoyao was clearly in the know long ago, but had chosen not to inform him. It was obvious that she wanted to watch him make a fool of himself. Yaoyao placed a hand on the tip of her snow-white chin, her beautiful eyes lowering slightly as she answered, "If I tell you everything, life would be so boring." Zhu Yuan rolled his eyes as he sat down and said in a slightly depressed manner, "What do I do now? I'll only draw a horde of aquatic beasts if I enter the Genesis reservoir." The key reason was that the aquatic beasts he attracted kept growing in numbers and strength. With his current strength, he really could not handle them. Zhu Yuan let out a deep sigh as he retrieved a bottle filled with Dragon Genesis essence crystals. These were the spoils of his hard work from earlier, and were likely only enough for him to achieve a 4 dragons rank Genesis marrow baptism. However, that was obviously not going to satisfy Zhu Yuan. He was still not a purple sash disciple, and if he lost this chance, it would likely be a long time before he could come to the Genesis reservoir again. Thus, he intended to benefit as much as he could. While Zhu Yuan was dazedly staring at the glittering Dragon Genesis essence crystals, a shadow suddenly flashed past. Zhu Yuan suddenly felt his hand become lighter as the bottle disappeared. Zhu Yuan was stunned, and hurriedly turned his head, only to dumbstruck when he saw Tunton holding the bottle in its mouth as it poured the contents into its belly, before smacking its lips in satisfaction. A miserable howl rang out in the valley. Zhu Yuan charged over, grabbing Tunton's neck as he shook it violently and roared, "You bastard, spit it out." That was the fruits of his labor. Seeing them swallowed by Tunton had put him on the verge of exploding. However, no matter how hard he shook, Tunton's lips remained tightly sealed, even leaving bloody scratches on Zhu Yuan's face with its paws. An ugly fight ensued between beast and man, filled with bitterness and desperation. Yaoyao sighed as she placed a hand on her temple. These two were basically idiots. After fighting for a good chunk of time, Zhu Yuan was finally able to save a thumb-sized Dragon Genesis essence crystal from Tunton's mouth. The price he paid was being covered all over in bloody scratches, every single one Tunton's handiwork. Though Zhu Yuan only managed to snatch back a single crystal, Tunton was obviously not very happy. After all, allowing something that was already in its mouth to be snatched away was extremely humiliating to it. "Your grandmother." Zhu Yuan could not help but curse as he looked at the single pitiful Dragon Genesis essence crystal in his hand. Let alone a 4 dragon baptism, he didn't even have a 1 dragon baptism now. A small pebble hit Zhu Yuan's forehead. Yaoyao rolled her eyes at him and said, "No cursing, Tunton." A gloating look immediately surfaced in Tunton's eyes as it joyfully ran towards Yaoyao. However, Yaoyao shot at a glare, causing Tunton to hurriedly come to a stop, whimpering as it lay on the ground. Zhu Yuan dragged a hand down his face as he moaned, "Looks like I'll have to head back in." It was impossible for him to stop now. He had no choice but to enter the reservoir again to hunt aquatic beasts. The only thing left to find out was how many times he would be chased by them. Zhu Yuan venomously glared at Tunton before standing up to prepare. The Dragon Genesis essence here originates from the origin dragon vein, and is also helpful for Tunton. That's why it snatched them away to eat, said Yaoyao. Zhu Yuan was surprised to find out. Truthfully speaking, he was not really angry at Tunton for snatching away the Dragon Genesis essence crystals, and was mainly having a playful fight with the latter. "After I get more of them, I'll give Tunton a little." Zhu Yuan shrugged. Increasing Tunton's strength was not a bad thing for him. Yaoyao thought for a moment before waving at Tunton. Tunton immediately skipped over to her, before being picked up by Yaoyao and thrown to Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan hastily caught it, his eyes wide with confusion as he stared at Tunton's small eyes. Bring Tunton with you. Yao Yao ignored their confusion. Since it wants a share of the good stuff, let it work for it. With Tunton following you, you will no longer need to worry about being chased by the aquatic beasts. Tunton's strength is enough to guarantee your safety. Zhu Yuan was overjoyed. With a powerful helper like Tunton, the aquatic beasts that wanted to eat him would practically be throwing themselves into his net. All of them would be killed no matter how many came. You'd better work hard if you want to eat more of those Dragon Genesis essence, and I'd better not catch you slacking off. Zhu Yuan stared at Tunton. Whatever we manage to get shall be split like this, 80% for me, 20% to you. He gestured with his fingers. However, Tunton was extremely intelligent, immediately understanding what he was saying. It also extended its paws, gesturing that it should get 70% while he got 30%. Zhu Yuan laughed due to anger. This little bastard still dared to bargain with him. Did it think that he was some kind of laborer? As such, beast and man began to argue again, hands and paws rapidly gesturing one after another. Yao Yao was beginning to feel an approaching headache due to their quarreling, deciding that she could not watch this any longer. With a casual twist of her hand, a Genesis Chi was flung, turning into snow light, after light that ruthlessly blasted man and beast. Half each. Now scram. Man and beast immediately fell silent. Tunton whimpered twice. Although it could not be bothered with Zhu Yuan, it still jumped onto his shoulder. Zhu Yuan also pouted a little as he avoided the snowy light, before his excited gaze turned towards the endless Genesis reservoir. With Tunton's protection, the aquatic beasts were no longer any threat. Chasing me for so long earlier, come and try it again now. Zhu Yuan sneered, his confidence soaring. Splash. He waved goodbye at Yao Yao, before diving headfirst into the reservoir again. Yao Yao massaged her forehead. Peace at last. Why is it so hard to have a nice, peaceful soak in the mist-filled waters of the reservoir? Zhu Yuan zoomed past on his golden Genesis Chi, rapidly cutting through the water. Tunton lay on his shoulder, its eyes lazily scanning their surroundings. Zhu Yuan was brimming with confidence again, no longer worried about having to flee from the aquatic beasts. When we encounter them later, I'll try to take them on first. If there's any aquatic beast I can't handle, it'll be your turn. The culture form Heavenly Yuan brush nimbly spun between Zhu Yuan's figures as he grinned. Tunton looked at him disdainfully. Acting so dignified, you're clearly just leaving the tough bones for me. They've come so quickly. Zhu Yuan did not bicker with Tunton, raising his head instead as he looked to the front with slightly narrowed eyes. The waters there were rippling as enormous aquatic beast after beast began to appear. Those translucent eyes were overflowing with greed and desire. Asterisk stomach grumble asterisk. Bubbles rose from the mouths of the aquatic beasts. In the next instant, the reservoir waters were ripped apart as their titanic bodies madly charged towards Zhu Yuan. Just a group of 200 feet aquatic beasts. Zhu Yuan icily chuckled as golden Genesis Chi rose from his body and completely wrapped around him. Rumble. His figure also shot forward, the heavenly Yuan brush in his hand rapidly expanding as its snow-white brush has pulsed dangerously, transforming into countless after images that surrounded the numerous aquatic beasts. The water rippled violently, blown away by the powerful force as an empty space was created. Zhu Yuan charged into the herd of aquatic beasts, his attacks deadly and powerful, every thrust of the brush piercing an aquatic beast. The battle was over in a few minutes. All that remained were golden dragon Genesis essence crystals floating in the water. Half of them were swept up into his sleeves, while he tossed the other half towards Tunton. Tunton opened its mouth, gulping down all of them as a satisfied look surfaced in its eyes. While man and beast enjoyed their harvest, Zhu Yuan's expression changed, catching sight of giant aquatic beasts swarming towards them from all directions. The dozen beasts leading the pack had all reached lengths of 500 feet. This was even more than the horde that had chased him previously. This time, however, Zhu Yuan did not flee in panic, instead patting Tunton on his shoulder as he said, "Hey, now that you've eaten, it's time to work." On his shoulder, Tunton seemed to yawn lazily as its gaze swept across the giant aquatic beasts that were enclosing around them, before jumping off and standing in front of Zhu Yuan. The water around it gradually began to boil. A terrifying Genesis Chi undulation slowly spread from its body. Its tiny body began to grow little by little, transforming from a little dog-like creature into a mysterious and ferocious beast wearing golden scale armor. When Tunton took on this form, the aquatic beasts around them froze for a moment, as if being suppressed. Although they were not Genesis beasts, but existences born from Dragon Chi, they were still unable to avoid the pressure. It was akin to the unease felt by a lower life form in the face of a superior being. The 500 feet aquatic beasts grew a little restless and hesitant, but in the end, their eyes still locked onto Zhu Yuan's body. The Genesis Chi from the latter held a fatal attraction to them. The desire won over the unease and pressure they felt from Tunten. Stomach rumble. In the next moment, the numerous aquatic beasts roared as their shadows loomed. The berserk Genesis Chi bursting out from their bodies, causing giant waves to form. Tunten watched them charge over as its front paw lightly stepped forward in the water. Its huge mouth opened, mysterious black light flowing within it. Strands of black began to converge, ultimately taking the shape of a half-foot-wide black ball. Not a single glimmer of light could be seen on the black ball, and any light that shined on it seemed to immediately be devoured, making it an extremely bizarre sight that gave one an exceedingly dangerous sensation. Tunten's head suddenly swung as the half-foot-wide black ball was sent hurtling towards the dozen or so 500 feet long aquatic beasts. The ball was extremely quick and seemed to pierce through space itself, appearing in the center of the 500 feet aquatic beasts. Next, it began to spin as a terrifying suction force exploded. The water around was immediately poured into it, creating a giant whirlpool with the black ball at its center. The dozen aquatic beasts were caught in the range of the frightening suction force. They struggled frantically as Genesis Chi surged out, but were unable to free themselves. All they could do was watch helplessly as they were pulled closer and closer to the ball, before ultimately touching it. At the instant of contact, wails of despair exploded from the aquatic beasts as their enormous bodies began to shrink at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye, ultimately transforming into a flash of light as they were sucked into the black ball, wiped clean from existence by its pure darkness. In the short span of a few breaths, a dozen aquatic beasts comparable to fifth-layer Alpha Origin experts had vanished, leaving only a dozen fist-sized Dragon Genesis essence crystals floating in the water around the black ball. Zhu Yuan was dumbstruck as he watched this scene. Who could have imagined that a dozen fifth-layer Alpha Origin aquatic beasts would be so easily exterminated? Just how much strength did one need to achieve this feat? Zhu Yuan gave an odd look to the shrinking Tunten. Just what kind of Genesis beast was this little fellow? To think that it would be so powerful. Tunten sensed Zhu Yuan's stunned gaze, causing a pleased look to rise in its eyes. It leaped onto his shoulder and extended a paw, pointing towards the floating Dragon Genesis essence crystals, clearly indicating for him to go collect their battle spoils. Zhu Yuan shrugged and swam forward, his eyes burning with excitement as he kept the dozen fist-sized Dragon Genesis essence crystals. Just these dozen crystals alone should be enough for him to reach the 5 dragon baptism. If it was before, Zhu Yuan would perhaps be satisfied by this. But now that he had a strong aid in Tunten, the 5 dragon rank was no longer able to sate his appetite. Zhu Yuan wet his lips and grinned, "Good boy Tunten. The two of us truly are perfect partners." However, Tunten merely shot him a disdainful look, as if saying that it was the one doing all the work, while his job was merely to tidy up after. Its pupils swiveled in thought, before it suddenly extended a paw and gestured that they should split the goods 40 to 60. It was actually planning to change the previous agreement, and wanted to have a 60% share. Zhu Yuan was exasperated. "Little bastard, you dare to take advantage of me?" He tossed and caught the Dragon Genesis essence crystals in his hand as he smiled. "Don't think that you should have the bigger share, because you're a better fighter. Without me, these aquatic beasts would be concealing themselves in the reservoir, making it nearly impossible for you to find them. Do you really think it will be so easy to kill an entire group of them then?" Tunten was stunned, before somewhat dejectedly laying down on Zhu Yuan's shoulder. It seems that Zhu Yuan's contribution was not small. Hence, it could only whimper twice, acknowledging the 50-50 agreement. "Little guy, do you think that I have no way to deal with you?" The corners of Zhu Yuan's lips curled upwards when he saw this, before continuing to speed forward on his golden Genesis Chi. As he gazed at the misty waters, an ambitious fire burned in his eyes. With Tunten's help, he felt that he may be able to try for 6 dragons, or even a 7 dragons baptism. Mists drifted over the endless Genesis reservoir. A figure in white descended from the sky, landing on one of the towering peaks that rose from the waters. Her pupils scanned the surroundings, as if searching for something. A breeze blew past, lifting a skirt adorned with lotus patterns while also revealing a set of enchanting curves. It was obviously Li Qingchan. Her eyes widened slightly all of a sudden as a cold voice rang out. What is the great chosen of the spirit rune peak sneaking about for? As her voice spread, the mist behind her began to dissipate as a young man in daoist robes walked over on the water. It was number 9 of the 10 great chosens, Yi Ji. He gazed at Li Qingchan, somewhat helplessly scratching his head and said, Senior Sister Qingchan truly has sharp senses. Li Qingchan shot a look at him, faint iciness swirling in her pupils as she said with an expressionless face, Yi Ji, why are you following me? Yi Ji chuckled and replied, Senior Sister Qingchan, I merely want to discuss something with you. Li Qingchan flatly asked, what is it? Could you give up on the 1,000-feet aquatic beast this time? Li Ji smiled awkwardly. Li Qingchan's eyes narrowed slightly as the icy aura around her grew colder and colder, so cold that even the surrounding air began to freeze. She frostily stared at Yi Ji. Yi Ji, do you feel that you have the qualifications to say such words to me? Her goal was that very 1,000-feet aquatic beast. If she succeeded in hunting it, she would be able to obtain an 8 dragons baptism, which would undoubtedly raise her strength. In response to Li Qingchan's icy gaze, Yi Ji took 2 steps back as he spread out his hands and said, Senior Sister Qingchan, my words alone definitely won't be enough to stop you, but I've only come here for one reason, to return a favor. Li Qingchan's brows furrowed. She soon understood, causing her pretty face to turn frostier as she confirmed, Kongxing. The appearance of the 1,000-feet aquatic beast had been very timely, coinciding nicely with the period where the other chosens were either away on missions, or stuck in secluded cultivation. She, Kongxing and Yi Ji were the only 3 chosens available in the entire sect, making it less competitive than usual. Especially since Chu Qing would not give up on such a good opportunity if he were here. After all, 1,000-feet aquatic beasts usually hid themselves in the depths of the Genesis Reservoir, and even chosens like them would be hard-pressed to find any. Now that signs of a 1,000-feet aquatic beast had appeared, chosens like them would naturally take action. Yi Ji shrugged helplessly. The truth was that he did not want to involve himself in a matter like this, but he did owe Kongxing a favor, making it impossible for him to reject. Li Qingchan's pretty face turned frostier and frostier, hostility rising in her eyes, as she stared at Yi Ji. Since he wanted to help Kongxing, she may as well get rid of him here. However, the moment this thought rose in her heart, she sensed formidable sword chi rise from the mist in the distance, like a hiding dragon that already had her in its sights. Kongxing. Li Qingchan's face turned towards the sword chi, frost practically spewing from her eyes. Kongxing was obviously nearby, ready to stop her from dispatching his ally. Senior Sister Qingchan, I hope that you can give this chance to Kongxing. There will be another opportunity next time. Urged Yi Ji. Fury flashed in Li Qingchan's eyes. She had originally believed Yi Ji to be after the 1,000-foot aquatic beast too, and not a helper invited by Kongxing. Moreover, none of the chosens she had better relations with were currently present. Given her strength, she would be equally matched with Kongxing, but if another one of the 10 chosens such as Yi Ji was added into the mix, her defeat was guaranteed. Though the 10 chosens were ranked according to strength, there was not a huge gap between them. Hence, she would indeed have no chance if Kongxing and Yi Ji were to join hands. However, she was really unwilling to give up like this. Li Qingchan's expression fluctuated indeterminately, as the icy aura around her grew sharper and colder. Yi Ji hurriedly retreated several steps. With a wave of his sleeve, the space around him began to distort as the complicated runes on his clothes glowed, ready to activate at any moment. In the depths of the mist, sword chi grew sharper and sharper as the faint buzz of a sword echoed. A grand battle between chosens was on the verge of erupting. When the hostility in the air reached its peak, however, the Genesi chi undulations from Li Qingchan's body suddenly weakened. Her face was ice-cold as she shot a glance at Yi Ji and the sword chi in the mist, before letting out an icy snort and turning to leave. Kongxing, Yi Ji, I will not forget this. She had ultimately chosen to do the rational thing and give up. After all, if she were to take on the 2 of them alone, the one who would suffer in the end was her. Yi Ji breathed a sigh of relief as he watched Li Qingchan leave. She was after all very popular in the sect, and there were quite a few amongst the 10 chosens who adored her. If they really ended up fighting here, there would surely be trouble in the future. However, from the looks of it, they had still offended her. Yi Ji let out a bitter laugh before turning towards the mist. I've returned my debt, the 2 of no longer owe each other anything. The cry of a sword sounded in the depths of the mist, as if responding to Yi Ji. Rumble. A herd of enormous aquatic beasts hissed in the reservoir as berserk undulations unfurled, creating enormous waves. At this current moment, two glowing figures were shooting through the pack, aquatic beast after beast exploding wherever they passed. The two glowing figures were naturally Zhu Yuan and Tunton. Ever since Tunton had joined him, Zhu Yuan no longer had anything to fear. He boldly advanced, drawing numerous aquatic beasts to them. However, the ultimate outcome that awaited all of the aquatic beasts was being turned into Dragon Genesis essence crystals, before being split between Zhu Yuan and Tunton. The intense battle was over in a short few minutes. Zhu Yuan swiftly swept the battlefield, collecting another few dozen Dragon Genesis essence crystals that were of pretty high quality. Not bad. Zhu Yuan was full of praise. He already had more than enough Dragon Genesis essence crystals to achieve a 6-dragon baptism, but it was still not sufficient to reach 7 dragons. According to senior brother Zhu Tai, a 7-dragon baptism was no longer an issue of number. Instead, the Dragon Genesis essence crystal of a 700 feet aquatic beast was required as a primer of sorts. In the face of such an entity, most of the Purple Sash disciples could only retreat. However, this was not really a problem for Zhu Yuan, because there was an existence at this site that was even more terrifying than the 7th layer Alpha Origin. But it's not easy to find a 700 feet aquatic beast. We've yet to meet a single one, mumbled Zhu Yuan. While he was mumbling, the battle mode Tunton beside him suddenly released a low growl. Zhu Yuan abruptly lowered his head in alarm, looking towards the deep darkness of the Genesis reservoir. The waters there suddenly began to churn, as if a giant wave was rapidly approaching. Next, Zhu Yuan saw a titan of an aquatic beast slowly rise from the darkness. Its size had exceeded 700 feet, reaching a total of 800 feet. Zhu Yuan could not help but swallow as he gazed upon the giant creature, before slowly backing away as he said with a solemn face, "Tunton, go and get it." This video will end here.